as of today. Hello to you all. Today I am making a brief video about the reasons why every major civilization throughout history has practiced fasting. We are going to look at that and answer some questions. Why is it that we find the practice of fasting in almost every single civilization throughout human history? When we study humanity a little, we discover amazing things. In particular, let us try to recall some history. We will start back with the pyramids. The Egyptians practiced fasting. Ancient Greece practiced fasting, and the Romans did as well. They would perform both dry fasts and water fasts, but basically it was a mix of both. The Essenes, there are traces, there you go. The early Christians, Lent, all that, we find traces. The Muslim world, Ramadan, all that. The yogis of India practiced fasting. Buddhist monks were known to practice fasting, as were the shamans of the Americas. The 4 divisions, it's the famous 4-5 days to clear the brain. Right. And then, well, the Buddhist monks, the shamans, and then all these peoples, the common denominators, they lived thousands of kilometers apart. They didn't meet, they didn't speak the same language, right? So they had totally different cultures. So how can we explain that they all adopted a practice of fasting, whether it was dry or water-based? Is this just a coincidence? Well, so personally, I don't believe it. They had all observed fundamental truths, such as what happens when you observe an injured animal. What does the animal do when it is injured? It will not drink, it will not go have coffee, and it will not eat. The appetite is suppressed, and this is true for humans as well. When you are sick, when you're not well, do you want to eat? It stands to reason. So for me, we are in a world today that is upside down, actually, where fasting clinics should be hospitals, actually, and then actually fasting is condemned. I remind you that in France, fasting is prohibited. This really goes to show the health dictatorship, the big pharma dictatorship, who especially do not want to bring back common sense, look at what our ancestors, and simply allow the body to heal itself. That is not accepted, and it is not permitted. So the whole notion of modern medicine, the laboratories and the analysis tests that cost a fortune, all of these scanners and all of this medicine we have today, chemical, etc. I'm not saying medicine has no place in emergencies. Extraordinary things are done. We managed to replace valves, things like that. Very, very good. But hey, if people get sick, it's because the terrain is unbalanced, that the psyche, there is too much stress, etc. So there you go. The idea is to parallel what was done before, because modern medicine is not 150, 100 years old, 150 years. So what did people do back then? The idea is really to be able to understand that fasting was known everywhere, and that today there are people who go wild in centers, and true fasting, water and dry, is very, very little. It is marginalized. We have the games, the cures, the fasting diets that we see a little in France because Germany has developed this a lot. But when we talk about dry and water fasting, we are really marginalized and seen as cultish, dangerous fasts, etc., without really understanding everything that existed back then in an ancestral manner. There you go. So the animal, indeed, when it is injured, it withdraws, it rests, it saves its energy. For humans, it's the same. Ancestors understood that when the body stops digesting this product, the body seems to enter another mode of functioning, which is ketosis. And then when you have a strong ketosis, you save energy. Dry fasting can treat infections if we can get very good results in diseases of Lyme and ticks that kill you slowly. We have a very, very effective weapon against everything that is a cold infection. And the body then places itself into a state of hormetic stress, and this hormetic stress will cause you to become very adaptable. Your body adapts to the environment and stress. It will create biological responses, biological, metabolic, and physiological to the stress. We send it through repair systems, the most well-known of which is, of course, autophagy. Therefore, we forgot that our ancestors didn't eat 3 meals a day or snacks. They didn't live surrounded by food all day. They knew periods of hunting, periods of migration, shortages, droughts, and times when there was no water, so they had to adapt. There were wars and travels. Therefore, fasting was an integral part of our ancestors' lives. We find that in the Bible if you look. And the body developed through these shortages very well. And for hundreds of thousands of years in this hostile environment with 3 meals a day, right? So our organism is not so only adapted to food, it is adapted to the temporary absence of food. And that is where one of the greatest misunderstandings of our time lies. We have maintained the abundance and the food endlessly. And then we have almost completely lost our physiological and biological rest periods. And the ancients had already observed this. They had already noted these effects of fasting. They often remarked on that mental clarity. All the great thinkers and philosophers would start fasting so they could write books, more focused. A feeling of purification, better inner mental clarity, and increased energy because digestion takes 40%. It takes 40% of your energy. And then an improvement in certain disorders, especially anything related to pain or inflammation. There, fasting is king. For fibromyalgia, arthritis, pain, or osteoarthritis, fasting, if done correctly, whether dry or with water fasting is less potent, but it still works. It yields results. We cannot deny that fact. There are publications that exist. It works. We improve everything that is autoimmune. That includes everything infectious when doing dry fasting, because water fasting works less well when there is an infection. You do not have the drying out of pathogens. You only have that in dry fasting. You improve any chronic pathology by taking a break. That is what rest is. So all their ancestors did not know about autophagy. They did not talk about ketosis. They did not know what mitophagy was. So the recycling of mitochondria, our energy factories that renew themselves through fasting. So mitophagy is an excellent way to regain energy capital. To take a break because you renew your mitochondrial capital. With old worn out mitochondria, you make new mitochondria. Ancestors didn't know this, but they could clearly see that there were results based on their own observations. And then that was passed down from generation to generation. And now modern science is beginning to understand the reason why. We are talking about autophagy, recycling, ketosis, and metabolic flexibility, reducing inflammatory markers and mitochondrial renewal. In other words, science is not rediscovering fasting. It is beginning to understand the mechanisms behind a practice observed for thousands of years. Therefore, we need to make an important distinction. Fasting was not born in a laboratory. It was truly born from the observation of living things, from people in the field who had abstinences, who had pathologies, and then we put them to rest and observed what happened. So when we observe completely separate peoples, everyone practiced fasting and possessed knowledge of it. They did not know each other at all. There is no possibility of coincidence. These civilizations had observed something that we are currently rediscovering with a little bit of science, but there is still not enough data. In dry fasting, we have almost very few studies. The body has an extraordinary capacity for adaptation and regeneration with rest. That does not mean that fasting has an answer to every problem. We really must understand that. Fasting must be adapted according to the person in front of us. And then there are discussions about something very individual. And then we are already preparing with short fasts. We observe how it goes. And then if we are comfortable with short ones, we can move to long ones. And then always without forcing, by observing what is going on inside, and then by following the person. That is why dry fasting must for me be accompanied if we do long duration. When I speak of long duration, it is more than 3 days. To have someone who coaches you, who knows how to see when you pass into the negative swing. Because if you go too far in dry fasting, you can pass into the negative swing. After, you do not have all the hormetic benefits behind. So the art of being in a group is that you have people who follow you and know exactly when you have reached your limits. Fasting should be productive, giving benefits, not the opposite. With our Russian friends, they tend to go hard, to force, and then sometimes it is not always what I observed. Me, there were things that were not going well, notably in the preparation, the recovery that I updated. And then there you go. So these were things that I had observed which did not seem right to me. And the fact of having corrected certain things, we immediately saw that people were better upon exiting, digested better. There was no more reflux, etc. It's about observation, common sense, observing life. It is not treating a pathology with dry fasting, but it is looking at the person we have in front of us, monitoring how they will live their fast. It's observing, understanding, and working on emotions during the fast. It is giving the best tools so that the person is as relaxed as possible during the dry fast. It is really the art of accompaniment. We made videos on that. So fasting has crossed centuries, religions, cultures, all continents. If fasting has survived for thousands of years, it is perhaps because it responds to something deep inscribed in our genetics and in our biology. There you go, and that is precisely what modern science is trying to understand today. But there is a lack of studies. We need studies. I invite doctors and researchers, if any of you are listening, to come and conduct studies, to collaborate, and to try to raise awareness of this practice that needs to be much more highlighted today. It is truly sad and a real shame that we are being marginalized and that there is no united movement of people saying, no, that is enough. We want to reclaim our freedom. There are studies on fasting. Stop saying there are none. We are moving forward. And let there be a movement so it is more widespread, whether it is water fasting or dry fasting, whatever. But there is really right now a necessity now in the era we live in, past 2020, for people to wake up, get moving, and then talk to doctors and say, I fasted, here are my results. Why not look into this? I am doing better. I feel better. My markers are regulating. So it is also up to you to be able to help promote these ancestral methods that must absolutely be brought up to date now, and stop hiding. Stop hiding the practice of fasting. Say what you do. Practice, experiment, you must go for it. It is the practice. Watching videos and reading books is good, but you must practice. So start with short things. 16-hour intermittent fasting, 24, 36, 48, etc. Go for it. You have many books on the subject. Start and choose the fast that speaks to you, the one that seems most adequate for you. That is it. My message for today. See you soon. Bye.